This is a case where the property owners association or homeowners association has covenants that prohibit commercial vehicles.
That's correct.
Why are those covenants not enforceable by the sheriff?
Yeah.
Thanks, Sheriff. 'Cause
I think it would be easier so that everyone could understand. Because Belmont, the roadways in there are open to the public, so it makes it a public highway. And because it's a public highway without a county ordinance, all state laws apply. And therefore, you cannot prohibit that parking because they are the public highway. All the regulations deal with that.
So in that case, their property owner covenants don't really apply.
That is correct. Not for the parking issue.
Not for parking, right.
That's at hand. That is correct. That's why we can enforce the speeding and the stop signs and everything else, because it's the public highway.
Okay, and I was just curious because we'd gotten into, I remember like Landor, Lake Caroline, one of those, we were doing property owner association things, and I just thought it was a curious precedent that we may or may not be setting, so.
Yes, those being the private lakes, or again, by county ordinance, they were adopted as the highways now.
Right.
And because of that, we're able to enforce it along with the state police too.
Okay.
All right.
Questions for Mr. Fincham at this time?
Actually, I have one for the sheriff.
One for the sheriff. Sheriff Lipa?
Sheriff Lipa. Could they not, your property owner association, and I know this from being at Lake of the Woods, I don't know if it applies here, but it seemed to me that they have the ability to fine themselves as long as they define it in their ordinances. They can go out and issue summonses on their own and force the person to pay that fine. No, they can't make them take it off the street, but they can force them to do that, unless they give that over to the sheriff's department.
Okay, the difference between Lake of the Woods is it would be the same as Lake Caroline, Lake Landor. They are gated communities.
Yes.
That's where your difference is.
Okay.
Belmont is open.
It is open.
They can assess them a civil penalty because of what the ordinance says for them. It's a violation, you can't have it in, but that's a civil process. That doesn't mean, and it's up to them, like I've told the members of Belmont, you can do what you want to do from the civil aspect, but if you tow one of these vehicles that by state law says that he can park there, you're going to have another issue to deal with, as the attorney will tell you.
Okay. Yeah, I knew there was an ability somehow to fine them for that, so that's basically what you're talking about.
Yes, sir, but they
can internally fine them.
That is correct.
Any other questions? Mr. Fincham, give us the Evelyn Wood version, please.
This would restrict vehicles in excess of 6,000 pounds and would not allow trailers, semi-trailers, or the cabs for semi-trailers to park on a public street in planned residential district. For example, would not apply to Lake Landor or Lake Caroline because they're R1 districts. Ladysmith Village is planned mixed-use development, which is a different designation than planned residential. So it was crafted.
Campbell's Creek would fall into that.
Campbell's Creek is R1.
It's open, right?
Pardon?
Open, when you drive through, there's no gate.
That's correct, but it's zoned R1.
Okay.
This is planned residential.
Okay, then that's different.
But Mr. Fincham, the folks over there at Long Branch Road, in that subdivision area where they have the trailers, and then I think Mr. Thompson has some stuff over there, would that fall under this?
No, sir.
Okay.
Those properties are actually still zoned rural preservation.
Okay. Okay. Thank you.
This is only, I mean, so if somebody parks a pickup truck on the road, this isn't gonna?
No, sir.
Okay.
Okay, any other questions, Mr. Fincham? If there are none, how does the board wish to proceed? You want to go to a second reading or go right to public hearing? I'm sorry, thank you. Public hearing? A motion for public hearing? Before we go, Mr. Well, Sheriff Lippert?
The concern that where Mr. Finch and I were just talking here to answer Supervisor Seeley and your question, by code again, 6,000 pounds would still put it in a passenger vehicle. So for the trucks, they start at 7,501. So if it's under 7,500 pounds, then it would exclude your pickup trucks. So pickups could be in there, but when you get to 7,501, now you get into the definition of a truck.
Commercial trucks.
Well, a truck itself.
Okay.
So we can fix that for the next part as far as.
We pick that to 7, that'd be good. The other thing is, $150 is a lot of money for a parking ticket. Take it from someone who knows. That's a lot of money. Is that the regular fine?
That's a fine that we have specified in other provisions of our traffic ordinance.
Okay, as long as it's consistent, that's fair. Okay, so we're gonna move to public hearing, March 27th, if we get a motion to that effect.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, motion,
One discussion point, they're gonna make the 7501 change.
7501, yes.
Yes, we'll clarify that.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
7501 will be the change. Motion made by Mr. Akers, seconded by Mr. Popowitz. Discussion, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, nay. That motion carries. March 22nd. Right. All righty. Mr. Ashcraft needs about 5 minutes, so we will take a 5-minute real-time break and be right back for the presentation of the county budget. Oh, Mike, as far as the redistricting committee, since there are twice as many people in Madison, we'll try to add one more Madison person. We'll reconvene. At this time, we will go to agenda item number 9, which is the county administrator's proposed budget.
Mr. Chairman, members of the board, it's my pleasure and one of my primary responsibilities as your county administrator to present to you the annual budget document on this 10th day of February 2011 for fiscal year 2011-12. I want to start out by following up with what Mr. Fincham had discussed earlier when we talked about the census and the growth of the county. Just remind everyone that our population in 2000 was 22,121. It's been verified now that in 2010 it's 28,545. And I think the key to this, though, is the third bullet. If you remember the rezonings that took place, many of them through the decade of the 2000s, we always said we were heading towards managed growth. It was the intention of the board not to grow too quickly, and thus you put caps on the number of homes, and there were proffer amendments made and so forth. You ended up almost at 3% growth per year. And unfortunately, the bottom did fall out of the housing market, and we've been a little slower than we would have liked. But over the decade, you reached your target, and I believe that is some shrewd planning on behalf of this board, and you're to be commended for that. Certainly one of the downsides is the unemployment rate. 9%, depending on what part of the country you're in, may be good. Here in Carolina, it's not so good. We need to get that number down, and we have the prospect of additional jobs coming. Certainly the McKesson announcement and 150 jobs as early as next year is a good start. And I would just remind you that we still have a large number of our workforce who leaves every day for employment elsewhere. And it's just essential that we continue to build our business community. A look back, it certainly was a year of just holding on. As I stood here last year and brought some pretty difficult news to you from the state level, and certainly hard decisions that we had to make budgetarily, it's been a long 12 months. And if you recall, the budget ended up laying off 8 people, or we reduced others to part-time status. County employees were reduced by as much as 2%, and most of that was to balance not only the budget of the county, but to budget other agencies and departments so that they could have a budget. So our employees sacrificed immensely over the last 12 months. And then, of course, to remind you that there were many state and federal reductions that increased local pressure on you to fund those programs. Comprehensive Services Agreement is certainly one that comes to mind. Ms. Hatcher gave you the financial report on the 18th of January, and all in all, it was very positive. And if nothing happens of a drastic nature between now and June 30th, it looks like that we will meet the majority of our financial targets. We heard you loud and clear that departments are to stay within their spending, and if we can keep the revenues where they are projected to finish, then we should be doing okay. The one area that I remind you of concern is certainly the new home construction and the 75 connections that we do have budgeted, and that impact that it could have on the utility fund. We believe we still have that covered with other reserves, but in the event that that doesn't happen, but we still feel like that there's a possibility that spring may burst into some good housing. We've talked a lot over the last year about our debt. You know, every county has debt. Every county that's growing, every county that is on the move will have debt. And those critics that complain about our debt certainly don't understand how government works. And I would remind you that a report came out in the fall of 2010 that this board asked to be commissioned, and it was updated in December of last year. The current county debt is $104,914,294. Your general fund debt is $27,791,134. Your public school debt is $31,931,358. Your public utility debt is $42,392,175. And the debt related to the Dawn wastewater project is $2,799,627. There's been a lot discussed about the revenue anticipation note that this board has taken out over the last few years for cash flow. That note is currently $5.5 million. It has to be paid back in a 12-month period. So it is not added specifically and is not defined as debt to the county. Yes, it's an obligation that we know we have to meet, but for the purposes of our annual audit, it is not described as a debt. I believe that needs to be clarified. And I would also point out, Mr. Chairman, that the proposed budget includes $10,962,341 for debt retirement. That is 11.3% of our operating budget. The figures that I just mentioned, members of the board, they're debated quite often in public meetings, and I can assure you that those are the numbers that we use that are defined in our audit. And if anyone has different numbers that they would like to show county government and our finance department something different, we certainly would welcome the opportunity to sit with them. That is our debt. That is what our audit will call for. The reassessment of real property has taken place or took place in calendar year 2010. As you know, we're mandated by law to reassess every 6 years. This is year 5 of that process. County residents were notified in January of the impact of that process. The overall decrease of real property has been estimated to be 16% countywide, and that is a decrease of $2.7 million in revenue to our budget. And I will get into that a little bit later. As we look towards the 2011-2012 budget, the overall budget this year is proposed at $159,169,397. Now, the 78.3% figure will jump out at you immediately. It's because your overall budget includes all of your capital projects, proposed and otherwise. So you're going to have a big figure to begin your budget discussions upon until you agree as to what capital projects you want to undertake. Your operating budget is $96,676,210. That's an 11.8% over the amended budget from FY11. And your general fund is $40,307,392, which is 15% greater than the amended budget in FY11. Some highlights of the expenditures in the proposal I'm bringing before you this evening. The first one is the increase to the Public School Division of $750,000 over their appropriation from last year. We also have an increase for regional correctional institutions. We have had an obligation to all three of the institutions that serve Caroline County over the last few years. We have not met those obligations, and this year we'll fully fund what we are supposed to be paying, and that is $437,143. Increase to the Comprehensive Services Act of $217,404, which now raises our commitment to that mandate, that state mandate, of over $400,000. Also recommending 3 full-time positions added to the budget. Mr. Thomas, as the finance liaison, I believe told the school board the other night when you met in joint session that we are charged to not add any new positions unless you could find the money to pay for them. These 3 positions, as they are proposed to you this evening, all will collect additional revenue or will save additional revenue, or the particular department created additional revenue to pay for them. In the case of the Commission of the Revenue, the tax audits that they do and the on-site investigation of the different fairs and festivals and the things specifically down at the Meadow Event Park and some of the activity going on in AP Hill is certainly a position that would pay for itself. The purchasing manager in the finance department, I can tell you, if somebody is dedicated to looking for the best prices and going out and doing the things that they're supposed to do for all of county government, it will save us a tremendous amount of money. And in the law enforcement planner, that is really an upgrade from a current part-time position, and the sheriff has identified different revenues within his budget that would certainly cover the overall cost of that. So the impact on the budget is $121,906 for those 3 positions. And I would also highlight that we are reestablishing the summer jobs program at $10,000, primarily to cut grass for the Public Services Division, or Public Works Division, this summer. That is a primary responsibility that they need, and it saves us from having to do other part-time funding. So if we can refund that program with young people, we feel like we're doing 2 things for the price of 1. Your capital program, gentlemen, is a program that you will probably heavily discuss as you undertake these budget discussions. What we have proposed and what you have talked about over the last couple of months in the general fund is a new fire station in Sparta, estimated to be at $1 million. A new fire station in Carmel Church, which is estimated to be $1 million. New equipment for that station in Carmel Church, which is $750,000. New public radio system, safety radio system. You heard a bunch about that this evening. You saw the price. We're recommending the 12.1. We feel like that will get you the best bang in the long run for your buck. Improvements to the Ladysmith Solid Waste Convenience Site. It's been well documented and well identified that that's the busiest site in Caroline County. It needs upgraded. People are just desperate sometimes to get in there. They have to wait long periods of time. We've put that off a long time. It's about time that we move forward with that. The construction of a new YMCA, estimated at $6 million. The initial payment of that would be out of the proffer fund and would be no expense to county taxpayers. And the renovation of the county park, we are recommending that if you do go to a voter referendum at any point in the future, that would be considered. Otherwise, that project should not be considered because of the expense. In public education, we're recommending in this budget, and it was also, I believe, per the discussions that were held the other night, that the HVAC system and the renovations to Caroline High School be bundled into one particular program, and you can see the prices identified for each of those. And then the $9 million for the renovations to the Bowling Green Primary School, which would then set it as a pre-K 5 system on this end of the county, as you have on the western end of the county, and in the double standard in which we have an education in this county right now. All three of these projects are proposed and are funded within this budget. I remind you that your general fund transfers, $3 million in debt retirement, $540,000 in the social services area. Just mentioned the additional $750,000 for public school division, which brings that appropriation up to $11,750,000. Your local share to the Comprehensive Services Act is $490,066. And then, if you recall, many years ago, you dedicated to debt retirement a portion of the personal property tax, and this year it'll be $1,635,927 that will be transferred for debt. In the human resources area, there's funds provided in this budget for 180 full-time salaries and 50 part-time employees. The 3 new full-time positions I just mentioned. The premiums will continue to be paid and met for the VRS and the health insurance of our employees, the match. And there are no employee salary increases proposed in this budget. I know there are other salary increases that are proposed by other agencies, but again, at this time, we are not proposing for our county employees. Mr. Chairman, as we turn to revenue, which is obviously something that has to pay for the expenditures that I just outlined, the current tax rate is at 53 cents. I remind you that reassessment reduces those revenues $2.7 million. In order to keep the same amount of revenue at the equalized rate, the increase has to be 10 cents on the property tax rate. 53 to 10, that brings you to 63. And that's funding lost from the reassessment. I am proposing this evening that you consider an additional 12 cents to cover the expenditures that I've just outlined. Number one, 6 cents of that 12 goes directly to debt service. 3 cents of that increase goes directly to public schools, which is the $750,000 that I just outlined. And 3 cents goes to establishing a debt reserve fund for debt that will kick in FY13 and beyond to prepare you for the next couple of years and not have a jolt whenever you have to consider this budget next year. And that would raise the overall tax rate to 75 cents. And as I mentioned, the debt retirement fund, the specific number is $744,387 that would be set aside for payments that would be made in FY13 and beyond. In the Public Utilities Fund, we continue to be self-supportive for both the operations and the capital side, as long as obviously we meet our obligations with our availability fees and other things of that nature. And we also are proposing another 5% increase in user rates that will raise $235,669 for the utility fund. We've been very successful in keeping a steady rate over the last few years. I believe that's a good way to do that. And obviously the costs continue to grow in chemicals and things like that. That 5% has worked out good for us. Just to highlight the budget very quickly, you have an increase in the real estate tax rate of 22 cents, to a total of 75 cents. You have an increase in the local share to the public school division of $750,000 to $11,750,000. We're asking you to increase the utility user rates by 5%. We're asking you to include $10,962,341 for debt retirement if the capital projects, as proposed, are fully funded. We ask you to increase the regional correctional institutions to 437,143. We're asking for 3 full-time employees be added. Increases are necessary for the Comprehensive Services Act of 217-404 and the establishment of the Debt Retirement Fund for FY13 and beyond. I conclude, Mr. Chairman, that this budget addresses the department needs and it proposes the various capital improvements that are necessary for this county to continue to move forward. We tried to keep every department to the best we could at level funding. There are certain considerations that are necessary as departments have gone over the last couple of years with certain pieces of equipment or certain other things that are needed for them to continue to operate at a full level to our citizens. But by and large, we have kept the department budgets where they were trimmed over the last couple of years. This budget recommends the increased funding for education, for social services, particularly CSA, and the correctional institutions. And it also plans for the first time for the debt that is coming your way to prepare you for FY13 and beyond. I want to give my thanks to Ms. Hatcher. She's worked hard on this budget as we considered it, and certainly to you too, Mr. Chairman, as the liaison for finance to the county staff. We appreciate your input as well. And gentlemen, I'm open for any consideration of any questions or comments you may have.
Okay, Mr. Ashcraft, while folks get back to their seat, I wrote a couple down, and I wasn't sure. I'd asked Ms. Hatcher Tuesday at our school board meeting, and I just want to make sure we're clear. The $9 million projected school project that I guess we're here in March, if we got it or not, debt service for that project is in the budget?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And debt service to fix both the HVAC and renovate the high school, debt service is in the budget for this year?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And those are both 30-year loans? Is that the case? 20? Those are 20-year loans. Okay. Conceivably, as we work through the budget, we may make that a 30-year loan so the debt service impact is a little smaller, if that's possible?
I think we only have one funding source for those, isn't that correct? Unless we go another direction, VPSA is only 20.
VPSA is only 20. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. I just want to make sure so we all know. And your last slide stated that the tax increase, or one of the last ones, stated that the tax increase was 22 cents, and which is true, but there's a little more to that. It's 10 cents to equalize the tax rate. So to those who don't really know, you would pay at an equalized tax rate, you would pay the same amount of tax this year as you paid last year, and that compensates for the drop in housing, land costs, or whatever.
Correct.
But the real net increase that you're proposing is 12 cents.
That's correct, sir.
To make the 22.
Well explained. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Mr. Akers, do you have any questions?
No.
General? Okay. Mr. Steele?
Seeing this for the first time, I've got to take a closer look.
Okay. Ms. Popowitz?
Not at this time, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you so much, gentlemen. Okay. We will, as we work through, we'll probably have to schedule our series of budget work sessions. As you know, March and April tend to be very well, and I think we've set up the end of April to actually establish the tax rate. That was the date? The end of March?
Ms. Curran is at the end of March, if possible, March 22nd, if you could set the date at that rate at that time.
Okay. Well, we'll have to work on that, so we'll have to set up a meeting between that. Okay, that concludes the budget presentation, and I'm sure there'll be much discussion about the budget as we move forward. Mr. Ashcraft, I have a note for 9A. What is that? Oh, back to sheriff's vehicles, thank you. 9A was the sheriff's vehicles. Having seen the budget, the debt service for sheriff's vehicles was not in that budget, was it?
Yes, it is.
The debt service for sheriff's vehicles was in the budget,
It's a lease purchase, yes.
because it's a lease purchase.
That's correct.
Okay. And Sheriff Lip, I appreciate you and Major Mosier waiting. You don't have to get up. I just wanted to make sure, when we did the budget presentation, just to make sure the process was right, that we know the money for your vehicles was included in the budget. We know that now. Mr. Akers?
Mr. Chairman, I'd make a motion that we approve the lease purchase of the 17 vehicles that's requested by the Sheriff's Office, along with the equipment that goes along with it, up to $625,000, is that the figure?
Second.
Mr. Chairman, I have a question.
Discussion, Mr. Seeley?
It's in next year's budget that we haven't approved yet. Is that what I'm understanding?
The cost of the sheriff's vehicles, we will order the vehicles now, because you will get, and make sure, I'm just going to try to repeat it. You stay there. If I get it wrong, stand up. You may want to stand up now to be ready, but the sheriff's vehicles we're going to order now, and we will sign a contract for the vehicles now, but we will not have to make a payment for the vehicles until we're into next fiscal year. Okay? And that was part of what we were calling the spring borrowing we were going to do, and our debt services, as they said.
This is the lease
is in
purchase.
it. I mean lease purchase. The debt service is in the budget already. So we order them now. We don't have to pay for them until after July 1st. That money's in the budget. Or that debt service payment's in the budget.
I'm just clear, we're spending next year's budget before we approve it. That's my only question.
Well, that's why I asked that we wait until we at least saw the budget presentation, and now we know that the money's in the budget for next year. That was the difference. Okay?
I think, Mr. Chairman,
If you have discussion, Mr. Akers?
I do. The fact is, you can either buy them now and get them at a cheaper rate, or wait till after July 1 when the budget's approved. I think if the purchase of the vehicles approved, any board member would be sort of ridiculous to approve the lease purchase agreement and not vote for adding it into next year's budget.
I'm just getting the point clear that it's
I'm just
in
trying to
next
get
year's
the point there,
budget,
too.
I think
and we've seen it for the first time tonight. That's my point.
I think the bigger point is that the sheriff needs these cars, and if we don't do this now, we're gonna spend another $85,000 on those same vehicles. That's the other part of this. So I just because we're approving it now and so we can get those vehicles in the budget.
Well, there are a lot of, I'm going to call for the question, but there are obviously a lot of things in our budget that we're going to work on that we can't change. We're not going to be able to change the CSA number. We're
Right.
not going to be able to change a lot of other numbers. You know, I'm all for saving money when we can, you know, so Mr. Popwood says it's $85,000. You make a good point. Make sure we understand where it is. I think Ms. Hatcher and Mr. Ashcraft have explained it's going to come out of next year's money. So, Mr. Akers has called for the question. So, the motion was actually made by Mr. Akers, seconded by Mr. Popowitz. All those in favor of approving the lease purchase for the sheriff vehicle, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, nay. Motion carries unanimously. Agenda item number 10, capital projects update. We have that. You want to-
I don't have anything to expound on that, Mr. Chairman. You have it,
I think we've all got it, and that's another part of the budget we're going to have to discuss in depth and detail because it includes a lot. All right, closing board comments before we go into closed session. Mr. Popowitz.
I have none.
You said you have none? Bob?
I have
Okay, sorry. Mr. Seeley?
I have none.
Mr. Akers?
No, sir.
I have none either. Motion to go into closed session?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the board convene and closed meeting pursuant to, number one, the personnel exemption of section 2.1-3711A1 of the Code of Virginia to discuss personnel matters relating to the position of county administrator, relating to appointment to office, and as well, okay, Reedy Church Supervisor. The consultation with legal counsel and briefings by staff, exemption. What?
He's not exempt. Just the personnel. Right, I'm saying you're not the subject. The county administrator's position is not the subject. We're just going into
It's-
closed session for the Reed Church Supervisor.
Right.
And then to be briefed by the lawyer for the MB auto litigation.
That's it.
Second, please.
Second.
Thank you. Motion made by Mr. Akers, seconded by Mr. Popowitz. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, nay. Motion carries unanimously. We will be in closed session, probably take a 5-minute break. And we will reconvene here. Thank you very much for coming.
Session.
Oh, wait a second.
Second.
That is loud. All right, Mr. Akers has made the motion to come out of closed session.
Second.
Mr. Popowitz made the second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Excuse me, those opposed, nay. That motion carries unanimously. There is one action item out of closed meeting, which is personnel. Oh, we got to certify. I'm gonna do that. And the other one, consultation with legal counsel, requires no action. Mr. Popowitz, did you certify that only those things we went into closed session to discuss were discussed?
I so certify.
Mr. Steele,
ISO certified.
Mr. Akers,
I so certify.
and I also certify.
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Akers,
I make a motion that the board appoint Mr. Reginald Underwood as the supervisor of the Reedy Church District to fill the unexpired term of Mr. Maxie Roselle.
Second.
motion made by Mr. Akers, seconded by Mr. Popowitz to appoint Mr. Reginald Underwood to fill the unexpired term of Mr. Maxie Roselle. Discussion on the motion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, nay. Motion carries unanimously.
Congratulations, Mr. Underwood.
Well, or condolences.
You saw the budget, right?
Okay, we actually are going to adjourn, or we don't have another meeting until March? March 8th, okay. Nothing else gets us, that was the one thing we had to take care of before, under time. So motion to adjourn would be in order.
So move.
Second.
Motion made by Mr. Akers, seconded by Mr. Sealy and Popowitz. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries unanimously. We